It's wonderful to have a chat to Jeff Brayley, social researcher at station sponsor McCrindle. They bring data to life, and you do that for leaders in business, in organisations, churches, community groups. Jeff, what is the data that leaders should be looking at as they look into the future?
Leaders should be using multifactorial data. It's all about variety and lots of different data sets. We want to help leaders become really powerful at impacting and shaping a positive future. And so futuristic thinking is what we want to encourage people towards. You also need to be thinking generationally, understanding how society is changing, and also be practical, not just theoretical. Leaders should have a vision for the future and a plan for today.
Now, generations are working side by side so much more. Do you have any data around that?
Absolutely. A whole report, and there's a great infographic on the generations at work right now. 4 generations in Australia, from Gen Zs aged 16 to 30, who are motivated and looking for accessible and approachable leadership, all the way up to baby boomers that are looking for proximity when looking for new work. They want something close to home. And so we've got a great infographic there available for leaders to engage and motivate their teams effectively.
Jeff, I've seen this treasure trove. It really is. You're giving full access for 7 days. So how can people actually get access to this?
You can get the 50 plus infographics, 40 plus reports, courses, all on mccrindle.com. Search McCrindle Plus and you'll find that 7-day free trial. And we hope it empowers a positive future for all of society.
Jeff, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Station sponsor McCrindle, and you can get all that at mccrindle.com. I don't know about you, but I'm not naturally all that brave. I'm not quite sure about going in and rescuing kids who are literally being trafficked through Southeast Asia. But David Cross has been involved in the work for over 10 years. He's now back in our local communities and he's got a heart and a passion for changing the lives of vulnerable kids in our own community now as well. We're going to hear both parts of this story on the podcast today. Please like, rate, review, share the podcast with friends as well. Helps us get it to more people. Let's chat with David Cross.
Towards Understanding with Clayton Bielen values being a positive radio program for everyone. As we present today's episode, please accept this little ears warning. Some of the themes discussed may not be suitable for children.
This is Towards Understanding. You're with Clayton Bielen, and a man who I've only met a couple of times, but every time I do, I walk away inspired to change this world in a better way, is David Cross. He is the CEO of Zoe Foundation Australia, and he joins us right now. G'day, David.
Hey, so great to see you, Clayton, and I would say the same about you, mate.
You're very kind indeed. It is really so good to have you in the studio and having a chat, especially as we start off National Foster Carers Week. And so we're going to be touching off a bit more around what Zoe's doing in that space as well. But let's start off a bit of your story. Tell us, firstly, actually, what is Zoe overall? And then we'll maybe start into your story.
Absolutely, yeah. So Zoe actually is the Greek word for life. So it's taken from verses like John 10:10. It says, "The thief comes to kill, steal and destroy, but Jesus said, I've come that they may have life and have it abundantly." So our mission is to reach every person. So we're a Christian organisation that shares the gospel with people all around the world. And the second objective, and what we're really a part of in our work in Australia, is combating child trafficking and the slavery involving children.
All right. Now, this has become something that has grown more and more and more passionate for you as well, and that's part of the work that you've done. So we can't tell all of your story, but you did spend a lot of time overseas. Tell us a bit how you ended up over there and what the work was that you were doing there before you came back.
Yeah, well, it's definitely on my never list. The never list. I'll never live overseas. Yes. I'll never be a missionary. I'll never have to fundraise. But God has an interesting way of changing those things around. So I was in business here in Australia, but I guess my heartbeat and my wife and my passion was to always help children. So we'd helped on kids camps. We'd been foster carers for a number of years, and then one Sunday night at church, we heard about human trafficking, and specifically child trafficking, and life was never the same again. So we did some research. We found out this organisation called Zoe, and Zoe International. They'd been going since 2002, and it's been quite an adventure. Within a year of hearing about that organisation, we'd exited from business, packed up our home, and then my wife and our 3 kids, who were pretty young at the time, had moved to northern Thailand.
Wow, that is incredible. And you know, over the years, this this topic of trafficking, and especially child trafficking, has been the top topic that we've spoken about on this program, and there is still so much work to be done. Let's talk about the work that you were doing in Thailand there.
Yeah, so Thailand, just an honour for us to serve in Thailand. I think we were amongst just some incredible people who love the Lord and are living out their faith. And so our work in the counter-child trafficking space is about preventing child trafficking. So we go to villages, cities all over the place, teaching kids about the ploys that a trafficker would use to trick and deceive. And then we work alongside law enforcement to rescue children from slavery. So if the police are doing a raid, some of our team, our social workers, will go on that raid, and they're the first responders to help the police as they're removing a child from harm. It is the police's job to kick the door down, to enforce the law, but our teams support them on operations. And when you
say support, you're talking about, so for that child, immediately they've got somebody to be with and care for them. Is that the sort of thing you mean?
Correct, 100%. And I think that's something that's probably been learnt over time. I think years ago, it wasn't really thinking about the needs of children. It was all about, what needed to be done from an evidence collection point of view, but we've all learnt a lot more, and so now we have the opportunity for our social workers to actually be there on a raid or an operation, and they're actually caring for the child from the point that they are removed from harm. And so we've found that it really helps a child, because you've got to understand they are living in hell. They're living in a situation that no child would ever you'd ever want a child to be in. And then the police come in, they remove that child, and often children don't know who's the good guys and the bad guys, and so it's trying to help put them at ease. And then the next part of our work is restorative care. So that is really hard work. Taking children on a journey towards healing and restoration, and that is deep in our hearts. But also, it's quite a journey that you go on with children.
Yeah, I'd imagine it takes a lot of time, and there is a lot of ups and downs, and there's a lot of distrust, and then trust being built, and then maybe feeling like it's gone, and all those sorts of things that are happening.
Yeah, 100%. And I think this is the journey for us. I think if you only worked on the rescue side, I don't know, it's really hard, right? You're seeing a lot of darkness, but we've rescued kids from some of the hardest places. Kids will come in and some of them won't have eaten, and so they'll just gouge their food to the point that they'll be physically sick because they're never sure where the next meal's coming from. We've had other kids, as they're responding to trauma, they'll crawl around on the floor like an animal, sit in the corner of the room, eat bars of soap, chew on cardboard, and you're working on this level of trauma that can never be fully understood.
Yeah.
But by the grace of God, I think because we're working the restorative care, you get to go on a journey with these children and watch them go into adulthood. Some kids will do vocational training, learn different life skills. We have kids recently, I call them kids, but they're now young adults that have got a job as a barista in a coffee shop. Another young lady started her own nail salon, and even when I was back in Thailand late last year, I caught up with some young people, and it's hard to fathom that I'm sitting in the room with the same person that used to crawl around on the floor like an animal. I'm there, and I'm there with his wife, got 3 kids, and you're holding the babies, and you're just like, wow, God is good, and he can heal a broken heart in ways that we could never even imagine. So, I share that story in about a minute, but that is quite a long story, and there's still some healing to happen in that journey. But by the grace of God, we see kids continual heal from trauma. Yeah.
You used the phrase restorative care versus care. Why is that?
I think God's heart is restoration.
Yep.
I think care can be a bit cold. So when you're talking about restoration, you're actually talking about every area of a child, from their mind, their body, and also spiritually, like how do kids heal? And so kids all go on their journey with that. And I think when you're talking about restoration, that is deep in God's heart. That's that. It's not just about, our work has different parts to it. There's the legal process with law enforcement and working with the prosecutor, for justice, and that's part of it. But restoration isn't just about the legal process. It's actually about seeing that child is created in the image of God and them learning who are they created to be. I've seen kids that have never touched a guitar before, as part of therapy. The guitar's sitting in the middle, and then they've become incredible musicians. And you think that's a gift that God's given them, that they've had this opportunity to untap and unlock, and it's just precious to see. We do vocational training, and so I remember when they were doing coffee and cakes, and so my job is so hard because I had to sample all these wonderful treats. But just seeing these different creativity in children, even with cake decorating, it's not just a bit of fun. We've had kids that made cakes for another kid's birthday, and so it's not just about you. Then it's about you being in a position that you can do something for someone else, or making a cake for one of the mums at Zoe. It's not their biological mum, but one of their carers. And when you start to see children think beyond themselves and blessing someone else's life, it's incredible.
The other part that you mentioned briefly at the start was part of that work was going in and giving ideas to different villages and whatever it might be, to say, hey, look, this is how people who are trying to traffic people will actually, this tactic, or they use this tactic. Have you ever heard the stories back of people saying, thank you so much for saying that, because it was tried, and I realised I didn't, involve myself in that, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, 100%. And we hear that more and more from school children. They've met people online and thought that this was someone who was legitimate. And then they've realised through education, because the thing about those that want to exploit children is they continue to morph their tactics. And so if we talk about northern Thailand, technologies come really fast. Data plans are very cheap. And so people can get access to children that they never were able to previously. So we've had kids come up, talk to our team, show them messages, and then realise that they were on a path they were being groomed towards exploitation. So when you start seeing those things, you realise just how important prevention work is. Yeah. And some of our prevention work we actually do with law enforcement. So if we're doing a program at a school, sometimes law enforcement will come with us on that program, and it helps to break down barriers that police aren't scary people. They're actually real people who are there doing their job to keep people safe. And I think that's all part of the work. Is we really want to build a community of people around children. So you get village leaders, school teachers, others that also are educated on the topic, because communities keep children safe.
Yeah. There is. I'm constantly fascinated and impressed by the work that is being done. I'm equally disgusted and to think through that there's somebody who's coming up with new ways to work out how I online can best get a child to literally destroy their life, but it will give me a small profit for a time. How do you cope, as you've worked in this space for a long time, with that, just the deep darkness that people are not considering other people of any more than a couple of bucks worth of worth, and that's it, but their life could be ruined forever. How do you cope with that as you go through?
It's been a journey. Can I say it that way? I think that when I first started, our passion and heartbeat is to care for children. And so with the adults and the perpetrators, that's a really hard space to think about. It makes me mad, and I get very upset and very angry. I remember we did a case where there was a court hearing, and our child that was testifying was separate. I remember one of our staff going up to where the perpetrators were and sharing her faith in God with him. And I didn't know how I felt about that, because I was like, no, we can let that one go. But it's really interesting. God's really convicted me on that, because he talks about it's not his will that any would perish. And that's a really hard place to sit. But often what we find is adults that perpetrate crimes against children had crimes perpetrated against them when they were children, or have been victims of family violence or other things that have happened in their journey. So there's often really complicated reasons of why did someone even do this. I have to just choose to get up in the morning, and I believe there's more good guys than bad guys, and I believe there's more good people that want to do really great work. And so I sort of temper this journey of being like, our role and the calling that we've got is to care for children and keep them safe. And there's other people's role that is to do the prosecution process. And maybe when they're incarcerated or the justice is served, then someone can go and reach them with the love of God and help them on their own journey. But it's still a wrestle for me. I am trying because I realise that I do many things wrong, and as a man of faith, like I've been forgiven for so much, but this particular crime, it just breaks my heart. And the thought that people do that to children is beyond my own comprehension. So it's somewhere I just sit in the mystery.
Yeah. Thank you for that, because I think it would probably be easy to give just a simple answer one way or the other, right? To go, oh, well, God forgives everybody, and I'm fine with that. Or absolutely, no, you don't have anything. So thank you for actually being willing to admit that.
And I'm not that holy, right? Yeah. I'm a completely flawed human being that's just, and it's really hard. Like, honestly, what we are aware of and the crimes that are perpetrated against children, it's beyond what my mind can ever do. So personally, I choose to kind of draw a line in the sand. And so the child's past is their past. And now that they're removed from harm, everything is about their future. How has God made them? What's the things that we can help them develop, the skills, and so they can have this wonderful, flourishing life? And that's where I come back to Zoe, right? The abundant, flourishing life of God, and that's what I believe for every person.
Yeah, that's great. So you spent time there, a number of years there, but here you are, you're heading up the Australian arm now, and you're based in Australia. So you did come back. Tell us, what does the Australian arm of Zoe do?
Yeah, so we spent 11 and a half years in Thailand, so a significant season of our life, and I'm very thankful to God for that period of learning. When we look at Zoe Foundation Australia, we have the same areas to prevent child trafficking, slavery, to be a part of the rescue or removal of children from harm, and to restore the lives of children. So we also still support our work overseas. It's a huge part of our heartbeat. I mean, the Aussie dollar goes a long way, and so we still continue to raise funds to support programs overseas, which is deep in my heart. But at the same time, and it was completely unexpected, we found ourselves back in Australia. We felt that, when we were in Thailand, we felt that God said to us, the work's not done. It's just begun. Take what you've learnt and take it back to Australia. And we thought, well, why would we need to do that? There's no problem here. There's no child trafficking here. There's no issues. And so we've, since moving back in 2021, we've been sort of looking at cases that have been prosecuted in the courts, looking at situations that we would actually say they look like trafficking, all the elements, but for some reason they haven't been prosecuted as domestic child trafficking. And so we're on a journey in Australia. On any given day in Australia, there's 41,000 people right now in modern day slavery.
Oh my goodness.
So 41,000 people here today are enslaved, and globally, a third of all those enslaved is a child. So in Australia, the numbers around children are incredibly low. Since the inception of the law, and since this was brought into legislation, there's only ever been one case prosecuted of domestic child trafficking. And so I'll speak anecdotally with people who are frontline workers. We'll look at court reports, we'll look at information, and we're seeing more and more that there are cases that look and sound like trafficking and have all of the key elements, but for some reason they're not being prosecuted that way. So we believe that it's unlikely that the global numbers, which are pretty consistent around the world, wouldn't be replicated here in Australia. What we are finding in reports is that there's been an increase relating to child trafficking in countries of higher net worth, of which Australia is one. So I think if we sit here in Australia today, most of us would say, you know what, that's terrible, child trafficking happens, and that's a Southeast Asia problem. And I was just the same when we heard about it. Southeast Asia, that's where we're headed. I think it's really hard when you start saying, oh, this is an issue in our country, because all of a sudden everything changes. There's a personal responsibility of what do we now need to do to try and make a difference here for our children.
Yeah. Why is it that there isn't cases being prosecuted? Is it that we are, as a community, going, well, we know what child trafficking is, that's what it looks like in Asia, and it doesn't look the same here? Or is it that we're just not we're not seeing it because we're not thinking it's going to be there. Like, what's the difference that you would say?
Yeah.
Big question with a not a huge amount. We don't have hours to answer it, but if you were to go, right, this is what would be the thing that we would change to understand it, so community wise we'd get it.
Yeah, I think simply it's a worldview.
Right.
I think that we just like it's someone else's problem. We wouldn't have that in Australia.
Okay.
Australia has every culture in the world.
Yeah.
So if it happens in another culture, why would we not think it happens here? But it happens, I think it's one of those areas that I think when the legislation originally was done, it's a federal crime. And I think we were thinking about how do we protect the perimeter.
Right.
But what we find in Thailand, we work in 5 countries. What we find in America is most of the cases we do are domestic. Most of the cases. I think the movies we see, someone comes across a border, they hop in a boat, they're on an aeroplane, and I think there's a perception that you need to cross an international border, but that's actually not the case. And I think that we have all of the elements in Australia or vulnerability factors that we see in other countries, like in Thailand, and there's a number of those factors that would make a child more likely to be trafficked. We have them here. So I think what we're doing is we're calling it a different crime, and it's not always that the crime won't get prosecuted, but it might be prosecuted under an alternative or a state-based law.
And is this coming from within families? So like within families saying, well, actually, we're not getting by it, whatever else it might be, so actually this child we're going to allow to be trafficked? Or is it people coming and kidnapping people and that? Like, what do you see more of in this country in that regard?
Yeah, and that's an insightful question because no one wants to think about it happening in a family. But familiar-based, like sexual abuse of children or exploitation of children, is one of the key times that we see it happening. In our research report that we have available on our website, we looked at 5 cases, and 4 of those were family-based.
Yeah, okay.
So there's definitely a case where, unfortunately, it's a parent, a biological parent, or a partner of a parent that then uses a child for the purpose of exploitation. And we believe the elements around that case are actually trafficking because it hits all of these key criteria.
Yeah. You might be listening right now thinking, okay, David and Clayton, thanks for talking about this. I'm feeling a bit uncomfortable, but I'm glad you are talking about a topic that needs to be the case. I thought you also said at the start that this is National Foster Carers Week. What's going on? Well, it's all for a reason. We're going to be back in a couple of minutes' time because it's from this viewpoint, it's from this standpoint that there is a remarkable idea and a concept that David and his team are working on around what could be in Australia and around this region for foster caring and caring for kids in that way. And it takes a whole lot of the story that we've heard already. So that's why we've been having this conversation. This is called Towards Understanding for a reason. We're learning things, even maybe if they make us a bit uncomfortable. Please do stay with us. We're going to be back with David in just a couple of minutes' time so we hear more of that on Towards Understanding.
Share your brand, your event, your message across 90 Christian radio stations and major cities in Australia and New Zealand by sponsoring Towards Understanding, hosted by Clayton Bielen. More than 210,000 people tune into Towards Understanding each week, and with just one sponsorship, you'll reach this immense engaged audience. Find out more about this exciting and unique opportunity now on the sponsorship page at positivemedia.com.au. Towards Understanding with Clayton Bielen.
This is Towards Understanding. You're with Clayton Bielen, and the CEO of Zoe Foundation Australia, David Cross, is in the studio with us. Now, we know that this program goes around Australia and New Zealand. We've been talking, obviously, more about Australia because that's where you're heading up, David. We've been talking a lot about the child trafficking aspects and that there is actually things occurring in Australia in that same way, and it's unpleasant to think about, but it's important that we do talk about it. Are you seeing and understanding that it's similar perspectives in New Zealand as well?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is globally, right? So in every single country we work, no country has got this worked out, right? So no country is like, hey, we've sorted this out. And no country wants to report on child trafficking, when you think about GDP and all those areas. So I think in every jurisdiction where we work, and this would relate specifically to New Zealand as well, there's gaps in legislation and there's challenges around definitions. And so what we all have agreed to is the Palermo Protocol. So we're looking at the United Nations definition. Then as countries have brought that into legislation, it's been a lot harder to work out how does that fit within their own laws. And so it's definitely a challenge.
Yeah. I had never thought about the fact that of course, countries wouldn't want to start reporting it, right? That actually, that's an interesting, like, you need somebody, I mean, it's sort of accountability on anything, isn't it, right? Like, if I want to actually change, I have to start, I want to lose weight or whatever it might be. I have to actually go, well, where am I? What am I going to do? What are the things I'm doing wrong? And what are the things I need to do to improve, whatever it might be? But I hadn't thought about it from a country to say, actually, I think every country would probably want to say, we want to change this, we want to make it better. But no one wants to say, actually, we've got a problem that last year you thought we didn't have, and now we've got all this big problem.
Absolutely.
How do you overcome that?
Well, so part of the problem, and so this is why research has been done. So Walk Free Foundation, they research every single country in the world. So if you're sitting there today thinking there's no way those numbers that are being said are right, you would be welcome to go into Walk Free Foundation. They have what's called the Global Slavery Index, and they evaluate every country of the world. So basically, they have a methodology, and they look at risk factors, they look at a whole lot of metrics, and then they say this is the likelihood of that many, what's the percentage of people in trafficking, and what would be the numbers. And so that's available for every country.
Yeah. So if someone's just joined us, let's quickly recap what we chatted about before. You and your family felt really convicted to go and live over in Thailand. You worked with Zoe there, and the remarkable work of helping kids understand what some of those grooming techniques, and so they could avoid that, but also going and rescuing kids out of that, and then doing restorative care for them, which is a long journey over many years of kids who have been trafficked, and bringing them out and taking them through all of the psychological and the spiritual and the emotional and the mental and the physical recovery and restorative work that is happening. Felt you should come back to Australia, look at that here. You've discovered that this is happening in Australia in the same way. But we did say it's also the start of National Foster Carers Week, and there's a heart for you around that. So could you bring sort of these together for us a little bit? Because I think that's part of what I see your heart and the work of Zoe here in Australia is about, is trying to bring these sort of two together as well.
100%. And I'm a carer. I've been a carer for a number of years. And I think if we bridge those two things together, what we know is that people will want to harm children. They look for anyone who is vulnerable. And so when we look at what the Bible says about that, God says, he places the lonely in families. And so if there's a child who's not safe in their family, if they've been removed from harm, they are more likely or more susceptible to have someone that wants to do harm to children come and try and groom them or exploit them. So there's no one on-ramp, or there's no one direction that leads to a child ending up in child trafficking. However, when we're looking at that, there's lots of different factors that can happen in a child's journey. So being in out-of-home care would make them more vulnerable. There's no question around that. And so when we're talking about National Foster Carers Week, it's an incredible opportunity for us and those that are listening to say, okay, well, what could I do? Right now in Australia, we've got 46,000 children in out-of-home care. What we're seeing is the number of people who are willing to do foster care continues to drop year on year on year. And so what we're finding is that more and more children are being placed into alternative care arrangements, be that a residential care unit, which is like a house which has rotating staff that oversee children. So it's interesting that the United Nations Special Rapporteur that came out to Australia, she released a report in the start of January 2025, and she talked about how children in residential care are being bought and sold for commercial sex. She talked about how there's instances of children in Australia who seem like they're child trafficking victims, but they're not being identified that way. And a particular cohort that she was pointing out was saying kids in out-of-home care are more likely or more vulnerable or are currently being exploited and used in trafficking-based situations. And so that's when we start pulling these two conversations together. Why do children end up in situations of being exploited? And that's a tough one to answer, right? So there's a lot of factors. We look at family breakdown being one of them, experiences of violence being another one. We look at education, lack of access to information, poverty, discrimination. So there was a graph put together by UNICEF in Southeast Asia listing all of these factors. But when I pick up that same graph and I bring it across to Australia or New Zealand, I'm like, wow. Oh, do we have family violence? Oh, we do. Well, that's a factor that they say makes a child more at risk. Oh, do we have the breakdown in the family? Oh yeah, we have that. Do we have discrimination? Do we have differences in pay rates? We have all of those factors in our country, here in Australia, and also in New Zealand. So we're saying these are the factors that make a child more likely to be trafficked. We've got all those factors here. So then what will it take as a community to mitigate some of those factors? And so if a child is in out-of-home care, you know, one day I'll tell you a story. I was coaching my son's basketball team, and actually, I wasn't coaching my son's team. My son's team didn't have a coach, and I sat on the other side watching it, and I used to watch how during the game, they didn't seem to get a very good deal from the referee. It seemed like the calls weren't, and if there was any complaints, like a tech foul came out quite quickly. And I was watching it, and I watched the game get really out of control. A kid got hurt and he broke his arm, and I'm like, this is crazy. This is supposed to be a game of basketball. So I said to the young men, hey, how about I be your coach? The following week, I sat on the bench. All of a sudden, that group of young men had an advocate, and everything changed. The game was different. It was more pleasant to watch. It had a calmer, if there was a problem or a foul was in dispute, you could call a timeout, you could talk sensibly. And it's amazing what happens when a child has an advocate. Everything changes in their life. And so when you think about kids in out-of-home care, if they don't have a safe and trusting adult or someone who's journeying alongside them, all of the different elements in their life are more challenging. I mean, we find that kids in out-of-home care have a much higher rate of dropping out of school. If a child goes into residential care units, 52% of them get a criminal record within 2 years. So this is national data. There's all of these outcomes. They're more likely, 30% more likely to be homeless when they exit out of home care. And this has flow-on effects for society. So when we're talking about, you know, National Foster Carers Week and the need for more carers, this is, I believe, the mandate of every single Christian. When I've been reading my Bible and doing some study around this topic, God's got so much in the Word of God about caring for orphans, but there's really strong principles around caring for the vulnerable. And so kids in out-of-home care may have a living parent, but they are separated from their parents. And some of them are separated long-term. And when God talks about caring for the marginalised and the oppressed and taking the lonely and setting them in families, it doesn't, when I read it, it doesn't appear as a suggestion. Like, it's so strong the way it's put in the law in the Old Testament, and then Jesus takes it further and talks about, you know, letting the little children come to him. And then you get to James 1:27, he talks about pure and undefiled religion to look after orphans and widows in their distress. So there's so much all through the scripture where it doesn't seem like caring for children and caring for the marginalised is optional. So what do I dream for? I dream for a day where every single church in Australia has so many families that are doing foster care that it's normal, that we have tailored all of our services, our kids programs, our language around that. You know, so when we're doing that, there would be so many families doing foster care. And if there's a family that can't do care, there's other families in their friendship group, life group, support group, home group, whatever that terminology is now, that are all supporting that family. So it's a community that wraps their arms around a child. And so one of the greatest challenges for kids in care is they don't have community. And I look at what the church is, and it is a community of people that love God, that wrap their arms around people and help to support them on their journey.
Yeah, love that. We want to talk about your idea for this because it is stunning. Just as a sort of a segue to that, I want to jump back just a little bit to what you said. You talked about the fact that those in sort of a residential care, was that the right phrase?
Yeah, residential care unit. Yep.
Is, you know, it was 50% get a criminal, 52% criminal record. I mean, let's just think about that. Like, kids who go in, over the majority will have a criminal record. A third will end up homeless. Like, this is awful statistics. Like, we can't let it just wash over us.
Yep.
Can I just quickly understand the reason? And then I want to spend most of the time on this other, the idea and the concept that you have. The reason that this is the case is because there's not enough foster carers. And so the government is essentially saying, well, we do have to do something with them. They're sort of trying their best, I suppose, in that sense. So therefore, we can't place these kids. So what we can do is put them in these rooms and have like staff who get around, but they're not necessarily there to care for them. I mean, they are caring for them, but it's not building a relationship, or that's not the key focus. It's to keep them physically safe as best they can in that regards. And that's why the environment's not actually growing a child. Like we all talk about, right? You know, you grow a child up in who they are, then that's what it is. This is the formative years. Am I close to the better description of what's happening?
And I think you're putting that you're exactly right. So we have a lack of foster carers. It's hard to be a foster carer, the way the systems works and allowances and all of that. And you got to have enough rooms in your house, and there's a lot of factors. The government and then kinship care is another model. So family, relative, or anyone known to the child. Right. But if there's no space, then a child will end up in a hotel room, an Airbnb.
Wow.
Or they'll end up in a residential care unit. And so, unfortunately...
a hotel room or an Airbnb by themselves? Or with,
no, still with supervised staff, but the challenge is often around staffing.
Yeah,
so you'll get a temp worker or someone just to fill those gaps to try and make sure that someone is supervising that child. But you hit a critical word when you said that it's completely void of relationship. So children heal through safe and loving relationships. There's so much research out there about the effects of trauma on the brain and how the brain, I'll use a technical word, becomes mush. It becomes mush. The wiring that goes through, it should go from here to here and it doesn't.
Yes.
And that's why you get fight, flight and freeze responses in children. What we find is that, and this is obviously God's idea, is that relationships help a child to rewire their brain. So in a system of residential care units where you've got multiple staff working shifts of 8 hours all throughout a 7-day week, you could have 10 or 15 staff all rotate through. It's a very hard environment to have a child have a safe and trusting relationship. In addition to that, you're putting 4 to 6 children. Most of them now are around 4 children. It used to be 8, and then it went 6, and now they're 4. 4 children of high trauma backgrounds together. And then you're taking away the consistency that child needs. And so, unfortunately, some children, there's studies that we've seen where an older child will groom a younger child and show them paths into sexual exploitation or show them pathways into drug dependence. And so that's what we're finding is, even if a child was younger and they were in school, unfortunately, if they go to that residential care model, they're more likely to abscond from school or get expelled. And so the challenge is that we've got lots of great people who are in this area trying to think about how do we help children, but it's a very hard model because it is void of relationship.
Yeah. So we've been doing all of this as we build up to a moment because your concept and your idea is revolutionary in many aspects and sort of in other aspects, right? Like how are we not doing this? Could you take us through what you see and what Zoe is talking about and would love to see as a model as we go forward? Yeah,
so our model is built specifically for children who've had the highest levels of exploitation. So these are the hardest kids to place. So if a child's been removed from a trafficking, slavery, sexual exploitation situation, very hard to put them in a foster home.
Yes.
What we're looking to do is build a new model of restorative care where we are trying to go against what we see with carers burning out. We're part of different groups and chat rooms and different things that you see through the amount of carers that we see that is just like, I can't do it anymore. I'm not a bad person. I've tried my best, but it is hard to be a carer. Carers often don't feel fully supported. So what we're looking to do is have find carers who would come on as staff working for Zoe, and then we have our own MDT, our own multidisciplinary task force. That's their role is to provide support to the carer and the child. And so ours is a really different model. It's a very expensive model. It's different to what is currently being done out there. Having said that, residential care costs upwards of $660,000 per child per year. The more recent reports put residential care at about $1.2 million per child per year. So our model is certainly cheaper than that. But what we're looking to do is ensure what we're doing is really putting the carer and the child at the centre. So if a carer is supported, they're in a place that they can really give and care for the child. I mean, we're looking to pay our carers, and so that's a really different model. our carers will be specialists, but we wouldn't say to a doctor, you're passionate about medicine, you go work during the day for free, and then at night you need to do a second job to, provide for your family. We don't say to teachers, hey, you're great at teaching, do that during the day, and here's a box of pencils.
Yes.
So we do that to our carers. So we're looking to say, we value you. You will come on as a staff member, you will draw a salary for that role, and we will professionalise that role. But you will be accountable. We will train you and help you and support you, because we want to make sure that you are safe and you are, thriving, because it's a hard place. It's really hard. It's really hard to go on a journey to help a child heal from trauma. So the model we're doing is based on the work that we do internationally. So the work we do in Thailand is very similar to that. So we're contextualizing that for Australia and looking to see how can we pilot this program in Australia with the hope of it being successful, and then building that and replicating it in other parts.
Yeah. When I first heard this, I'm like, this feels like a no-brainer, right? Like, it's literally cheaper than what we've already doing, and it's way better. So I can see that. I'm not very smart. Why is that not something that's being able to just sort of like those in the government or wherever it might be going, well, that makes sense. What's the reasons that this doesn't happen?
So we're on a journey.
Yeah, okay.
So we're we only came back to Australia in 2021.
Sure.
So we're in a process of having conversations to move this model ahead. There's a couple of things that we need, and one is to make sure that we've got really strong, robust carers who are ready to go, so that as we begin this model, we will have our carers ready to receive these children. So the carers we're looking for, we're looking to lean on our faith community. We want them to be part of a local church where the church can also love and support them. We can love and support them, but we think churches are great. We think it's a great place for families to thrive with kids' church and youth ministry. So that's what we're looking for, is building more of our carers so that we're ready to go, so our support staff can do a great job in caring for our carers, who can then care for our children. So it is a journey. We have a significant child protection system all around Australia and New Zealand, and it takes time to work your way through, but we believe that this is a model that would make a real difference to children. We've seen it done. We've been doing this work internationally for years. We've got proof that it works, and so now it's like, how can we step this forward? And to be really clear, like, we are trying to help children who have had some of the hardest backgrounds of trauma. So what we're not saying is this is paid foster care. There is still a place for foster care. What we're looking to do is say this is a very unique program to try and help children who have had significant trauma.
Yeah, rather than trying to do that through the standard foster care or a residential sort of care.
And it's, if you had a child who had had significant sexual exploitation, and you dropped them off on a Friday night at a family, in fairness, that would be quite hard for that family. That first 24 hours would be pretty challenging, and a lot of families have their own children as well, and so there's all those things that they're trying to work through. So we've got to make sure we have people who are the right fit, and honestly, I would say people who are really called to this work. And I believe they're out there.
Yes.
It's just a matter of finding them and then going on a journey to make sure they're the right fit, and then we will be able to launch this program.
So what I'm hearing, and we're wrapping up our time together, but I want to give you a moment just to say, as we come to this space, we're about to head into National Foster Carers Week. What is it that people should be thinking and doing? They're inspired about what it is. Is one of them, actually, if they feel like they're one of those people that you just said to get in contact with you, is that one of those things?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that sounds great. Yeah, let's do that as number one. But I also think, what's the next steps for people? I think all of us have a responsibility to do something. I think that is absolutely clear. I think for the numbers of children who are out at home care, it's far too many children, and there's not enough foster carers. So I think every single person listening to the call should be thinking through and praying through, could I be someone who could be a safe person for a child? The process to become a foster carer is a process. It takes about a year to do. So even if you are considering this, you could make a call to a local agency or look up the search, how do I become a foster carer? And there's a process. You can start really easy. You start with an information night. You just go there. There's no strings attached. They don't sign you up instantly. And you can start to pray through, is this something for me? Another thing you could do is look around your church community and try and identify, are there families already doing care? And what is something that I could offer that could help them? Foster families don't always know how to ask for help. Sometimes if you've got challenges going on in your own journey, it's really hard to be like, hey, can you cook me a meal? So it might be a matter of you suggesting, hey, I'm really good at making lasagna. I was thinking about whether you'd want me to drop one off next Thursday. Nice. It's a really practical way of helping. And I think all of us need to be a place that we are a safe and trusting person for a child. The number one way to stop a child being exploited or trafficked or ending up in a situation where they're abused or harmed is if there is one safe and trusting adult in their community. So if there is any child in your community that you're aware of is a bit on the fringes, work out a way, an appropriate way, to ensure that they are not being excluded or outside, whether it's through, speak to the coach, if they're in a sporting group, and just say, hey, I've noticed such and such. Work out how to do it. Speak to the school. Think about ways that you could help support a child, because we know that those who are wanting to exploit or harm children will prey on the most vulnerable, and they're always looking for someone who's isolated.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing so much of what it is. Just quickly, if someone wants to get in touch with you or your team at Zoe, how do they do that?
Yeah, they can look us up online at gozoe.org.au. So that's gozoe.org.au.
David, thanks so much for your time.
Appreciate it. Great to hang out.
From Zoe Foundation Australia, David Cross, the CEO, here on Towards Understanding.
Towards Understanding with Clayton Biellen. Share your brand, your event, your message across 90 Christian radio stations and major cities in Australia and New Zealand by sponsoring Towards Understanding, hosted by Clayton Biellen. More than 210,000 people tune into Towards Understanding each week, and with just one sponsorship, you'll reach this immense engaged audience. Find out more about this exciting and unique opportunity now on the sponsorship page at positivemedia.com.au.
It's wonderful to have a chat to Jeff Brayley, social researcher at station sponsor McCrindle. They bring data to life, and you do that for leaders in business, in organisations, churches, community groups. Jeff, what is the data that leaders should be looking at as they look into the future?
Leaders should be using multifactorial data. It's all about variety and lots of different data sets. We want to help leaders become really powerful at impacting and shaping a positive future. And so futuristic thinking is what we want to encourage people towards. You also need to be thinking generationally, understanding how society is changing, and also be practical, not just theoretical. Leaders should have a vision for the future and a plan for today.
Now, generations are working side by side so much more. Do you have any data around that?
Absolutely. A whole report, and there's a great infographic on the generations at work right now. 4 generations in Australia, from Gen Z's aged 16 to 30, who are motivated and looking for accessible and approachable leadership, all the way up to baby boomers that are looking for proximity when looking for new work. They want something close to home. And so we've got a great infographic there available for leaders to engage and motivate their teams effectively.
Jeff, I've seen this treasure trove. It really is. You're giving full access for 7 days. So how can people actually get access to this?
You can get the 50 plus infographics, 40 plus reports, courses, all on mccrindle.com. Search McCrindle Plus and you'll find that 7-day free trial. And we hope it empowers a positive future for all of society.
Jeff, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Station sponsor McCrindle, and you can get all that at mccrindle.com.